Up next on Inside the SCCA, catching up with a two-time national champion. Welcome next to Inside the SCCA, catching up with a two-time national Bielanski. We're here for our latest episode. I think we're up to 155 now. Our guest tonight is Bobby Sak. Bobby Sak, two-time Spec Racer Ford national champion in 2021 at Road America, 2020 at Road America, 2021 at Indy, right?
That's right.
All right, cool. Welcome to the show.
How's it going, Brian?
I'm good. Welcome to the show. So we asked everyone the exact same first question at the start of every episode. So here it goes. How did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we love?
Well, I don't really think I had a choice, to be honest. My dad raced cars since before I was born. So, he started autocrossing in the 70s, mid 70s. My mom autocrossed in the mid 70s also. And in all honesty, I think it was a week or two after I was born, my mom was back in a car autocrossing and flipped over a Corvette. So
wow.
I didn't have much of a choice. I grew up going to Waterford Hills road racing track as a kid, getting dirty in the sand pit and going and doing all the time, helping out timing, scoring, working at the track, and then meeting all sorts of people. And then he started racing in SCCA and nationals, and we traveled around to a lot of the same tracks that I still run at now. And then when I turned 12, I got into go-karts. So
okay,
that was my path, and then right into Spec Racer Ford when I was 17.
Sure. So I've done a little bit of autocrossing. It seems to me that it would be hard to flip over a Corvette. Were the courses different back then?
There was a curb in there, and she caught the curb, I guess, with the left front, and it just popped it right over on its lid.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Sense.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like they should be putting curbs around there, but I guess it happens. Right?
Yeah, maybe the safety stewards wasn't a thing back in the day. So
yeah, maybe at least a little iffy.
a little sketch.
Right.
So at age 12, you started in karts. Did you start in Briggs? What was your first?
I did. Yeah.
Yep.
4-cycle Briggs.
Yep.
At Flat Rock Speedway. In Flat Rock, Michigan. And it was like a roll. It was just a local. It was called the Ford Thunderbird Kart Club.
Nice.
And we had club meetings at the Ford World headquarters. I think it was once a month during the season, which was really cool as a kid to go in there. And then we raced on Sundays at Flat Rock, and so I was I was number 9. This is how I got my number, actually. Number 19 is what I use all the time still. Because my dad ran number 9.
Okay.
And so I used number 9 my first season go-kart racing. And then I couldn't get it the second year because someone had already taken it. So I grabbed 19 because it's the easiest thing to do.
Sure.
And then we won the go-kart championship that year.
Okay.
So that was the 19 stuck.
Yeah. Now, when you win a go-kart champion, do you get to switch to number 1 for the next season?
I could have.
Okay.
But I kept 19.
Yeah.
I like my number.
A little superstition there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Once you have success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know how old you are, and I'm not going to ask, but so how early could you go SCCA racing at that time?
I was the first season they changed it from 18 to 16.
Oh, okay.
So I'm 45 years old.
Okay.
But yeah, so this was 94, 95?
Okay.
95, I think I took school at Waterford Hills.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now we were talking about the old spec racers when they were sports Renaults. And do you still race a lot at Waterford?
Did I?
Do you still today race a lot at Waterford?
No, actually, I haven't raced there. I think I've raced there once in the last 20 years.
Okay.
Maybe.
So at Waterford, they actually still have a contingent of sports Renaults that run out there. I think it's 4 or 5 cars, and they're out there pretty much at the Waterford races. I think Steve Ives is one of the main guys out there still. Yeah. So they're still out there, and I don't know how hard it is to keep those things running, But
I mean, they seem to do it. I know that even at Elite Autosport, who I race with, Bo Martin still got Renault parts all over the shop.
yeah,
He's got a couple of Renault like complete cars sitting up in the rafters. I think David Tenney's, which was the last, I believe, Renault national champion, that car is still intact up in Bo's shop at Elite Autosport in Illinois.
oh, that's very cool.
Yeah,
That's very cool. We should get that thing down. So now there's a new SCCA wing or room at the Speedway Museum in Lincoln, and the Speedway Motors Museum, and it would be cool to get that old sports Renault in there.
that would be.
And let people.
I'll talk to him. Yeah,
let people see that thing. So,
Right.
yeah. And Alan Cameron was a guy that my dad raced with a lot, and I know he still has an old sports Renault, and he runs a little bit in Midwest Council, and I think he runs it up at Waterford a couple times a year. So, yeah, good memories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good memories.
I remember, even my uncle raced those when I was a kid at Waterford. My dad was in GT1, but
Okay.
I know he was in one of what my dad called sports real slow, because he was a GT1 car, of course. So felt the bottom.
That's funny. That's
Of course,
funny.
nowadays there's not much left of GT1.
No. Although they're trying to have a resurgence. Well,
It would be nice. The cars are amazing.
yeah, I was, when we didn't have a GT1 race last year at the runoffs, it was kind of shocking, kind of disjointing. It's
Yeah.
like, usually that's one of the 2 or 3, signature races of the weekend. At least it used to be.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I remember back.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. So coming from when my dad ran GT1 Trans Am
Sure.
forever, and I ran in Trans Am, in 2003. So, and I grew up just being around Trans Am cars all my life.
Yeah.
And so, I've got a soft spot for GT1, but they're just so expensive.
Yeah. I think what's helping partially with that is if they can get some of those TA2 cars back. I think a lot of the people who are running GT1 were like, if I'm going to run GT1, and I might as well go TA2 racing.
Oh, right. There's competition. That's what we really want, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, 95, you take your first school. You start racing the sports spec racers at that point. I guess that would probably.
And when I did my schools, I did it in a Datsun,
Okay.
a GT2 Datsun, who was a friend's, and then also in a Mazda RX-7, Mike Pinnegers, and then I ran a few races in those before I jumped into Spec Racer the next year.
Okay.
And I did that with Hal Briand. We actually split the season in '97. I ran regionals, and he was running nationals in his car with Phil Kern Motorsports.
Okay. Very cool. When did you get into the spec racers?
Why?
When? And why? Sure, we'll go both ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was in about 97, 98 is when Bo built the car I currently drive is the same car, but there's a story behind that too. But spec racers, we thought my dad wanted to make it about driving and not about spending more than the other guy.
Sure.
He's already doing enough trying to spend more than the other guy in GT1. And he thought it was the next progression up from Briggs and Stratton go-karts was, and getting me through the schools and everything. And then Spec Racer gave me the platform where I could, try to work on momentum and car control at lower speeds, where if you lose momentum, especially in the Gen 2 era where I started, you're going to struggle to get it back. And so maintaining exit speeds and just working on getting out of the corners, that was the biggest thing for me was when I started in Spec Racer was get out of the corners. Don't overshoot into the corners. It's more important to get the speed coming out. So that's really to this day still how I try to drive. And then you kind of I got with Spec Racer. I did regionals in '97 and then went to nationals in '98. That's when Bo Martin and Elite Autosport built my car for me, and went back to Phil Kern in '99 because Bo would not run the Pro Series.
Okay.
I wanted to run the Spec Racer Ford Pro Series in '99, and so we did that, and then we brought the car back in-house did it ourselves for 2000 with my own team and my dad's Trans Am team. So between the two of those, the crew chiefs kind of shared the responsibilities for both cars and everything, and traveled the country, and it was one of the most fun seasons I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
with John Black and Warren Stillwell and Keith Scharf and all those guys from back in the day. And John's still running them too. So
yeah.
Yeah,
John's running out here.
Moved into World Challenge for a year or two.
Right.
And I ran with Turner Motorsports in 2002, and then ran a Corvette. And well, actually, the Corvette was in 2001 in World Challenge GT, and Turner Motorsports 2002, and then 2003 was supposed to be the start of my Trans Am career, and so I ran that full season as a rookie, and there were a whole lot of politics involved in Trans Am at that point with things, and we decided to pull out of Trans Am completely after 2003. So that's when I went out and had to get a real job for a while.
Sure.
And opened some restaurants and then got back into Spec Racers in 2010.
Okay.
So I took about 6 or 7 years off of racing completely while I started some restaurants.
How did you get in the restaurant game?
Well, after my dad closed up the Trans Am team, which I was the operations manager for that out of college. I graduated from Western Michigan in 2001, and then with a management degree, and it just made sense for me to manage the race team, and so I did that for us. And I had Stu Hayner as a teammate that year. But after that ended, I needed to find something to do, and I always thought that opening up a quick serve restaurant at Western in Kalamazoo, Michigan, was a great idea. It could be lucrative and fun, and I had an interest in it. So I opened a pita pit. It's called the Pita Pit, and we opened a restaurant in 2005 in Kalamazoo, and then opened a bar in 2008 in Kalamazoo, and now I'm no longer in either business, back in Detroit area, living here. So there was a lot of good times and good things about the restaurant industry, and a lot of the other side of it too that I don't miss.
Sure. Yeah, the reason I ask is my kid's starting culinary school next month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious how you get from racing
we were a
to
franchise.
restaurants.
I didn't get into the whole culinary side of things. And then we were a bar on the other side, so it was more or less just college kids everywhere at all times.
Right. Yeah, and if you're going to drink on one side, you want to have something to munch on from the other side.
Absolutely, that was the idea. It was good for a while until it wasn't. COVID kind of killed the bar at the end. So Cool. For those folks watching, there's some sort of glitch going on my end, so you don't have to check your system. It's happening, and I'm not going to stop the podcast because I think we're going to be fine. And I apologize for the little glitch that we're getting every couple of 30, 40 seconds. So, but everything sounds good. So we're gonna keep going here. So when you came back to racing, was there any thought of trying to do anything other than go back to Spec Racer Ford, or what was your thought process at that point? Well, honestly, the whole reason I got back into it in 2010 was actually in a Trans Am car.
Oh, okay.
So I ran. My dad, our old crew chief, had a car, and a guy from Panama that he was bringing the car up here. And so I got to do 3 Trans Am races in 2010 at Brainerd, VIR, and Road Atlanta. And at the first one at Brainerd, because there was also a Spec Racer Pro Series that year, but they had a very low car count at Brainerd, and Brainerd's got Spec Racers as their school cars.
Okay.
So Eric Skurmans, who used to run Enterprises, said, "Hey, we need some guys to run the Spec Racer race to get some car count up. We've got these cars." And they said to me, Tommy Dreesy, and RJ Lopez, they put us all in one, and we just had to pay $500.
Yeah.
And we got a free set of tires to run for the weekend as well. So they were losing money, but it was fun for us, and it was track time. And so we said, yeah, sure, we'll do it. Now those cars, we were talking earlier, those school cars were nothing special. But my claim on that weekend was that of the 3 of us Trans Am guys at that point back in Spec Racer, I smoked Tommy Dreesy and RJ Lopez because I had driven these cars plenty in the past. So, but it was a fun weekend. And then of course we went to VIR, and the same thing happened there. But this time, Enterprises actually put me into one of Hagerman's cars, which was way better than a school car, of course. And actually got second place in the rain at VIR, and so I was rehooked to Spec Racer. Yeah. That was a quick funny story from that race was Trey Ayers was running. I didn't know who Trey was at that point.
Right.
Because I had just kind of come back, and I didn't realize he was any good. But obviously he is. He's a former national champ too.
Sure.
So, but he actually hit me from behind, but with the back of his car in that race.
Oh, that's impressive.
It was impressive because I felt a bump, and I looked in my mirror and I see the back of his car, and it was so going into turn one, he looped it under braking and hit me from behind. So we just went, back to back, and it was kind of wild. It was
that's
one
funny.
of those, you look in your mirror and you're like, wait a second, what?
Did I just see what I just saw?
Yeah, exactly. So, but then after that second place finish, I was hooked, and then I actually didn't race in 2011 or 2012. But in the winter of 2012, I was just sitting on my couch and looking at Facebook of all places, and I happened to notice that because I was part of the Spec Racer Ford Facebook page.
Sure.
And I happened to notice there was a car cover for sale for some reason, and for some reason I clicked on this link for this car cover. I posted on the Spec Racer page.
Right.
And literally the post just below that one was Spec Racer chassis number 150 for sale. And that was my old car.
Oh.
The exact car that Bo Martin built me in 1998. That we had sold in 2001.
Okay.
And it ended up we sold to somebody in Seattle, and it ended up back in New York with John Weisberg.
Wow.
And it was for sale for cheaper than we sold it for in 2001. So
yeah.
It felt like it was an omen, bought it back, and got back into it in 2013.
That's
so
fantastic.
That was from 2013, other than 2014, because that was the year I saved up to put the Gen 3 motor in it, and that was Laguna Seca runoff, so I wasn't going out west that year.
Right.
But ever since then, we've been back and doing Spec Racer the whole time. Since then, I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Any thoughts of doing a second class or something else?
Not so much. I ran the WRL race with Russ Turner and Denny Stripling and Richard Stevens at Sebring last fall, and I mean, that was a ton of fun. We had a great time. I'm definitely much more into sprint racing than endurance racing. I just love the qualifying laps every lap. But as far as other classes, it's just a money thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone wants to put me in a car, I'm all about it.
Sure.
You just tell me when, and I'll try and be there. But Spec racers are such a good bang for the buck.
Right. So was it 4 fast guys in Denny?
No, that was still 3 because we didn't have Ogburn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
He had a family thing. Dave Ogburn couldn't make that weekend, so I took his spot.
That's funny. That's funny. The first time I heard that, I was like, "Oh, that is just a blast," and then I realized that Denny really wasn't a slow guy.
Those guys, they've become some of my best friends in racing, and they're just awesome to hang with and be around. We have a ball every time we go out. Yeah. Honestly, they're the ones that basically got me to go to Road Atlanta this past weekend because when I talked to them while they were at Sebring, I got so jealous. I was like, okay, I cannot, because I was just going to do Northern Conference this year.
Right.
Because the runoffs are up at Road America.
Sure.
And I was like, why travel if I don't need to? But I was so jealous of them at Sebring. I was like, all right, I got to do something. So signed up for Road Atlanta.
Yeah.
So
very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I guess, then to 2020, and that is Road America. I guess since you're a northern guy, you've got lots of laps at Road America.
A few thousand, maybe.
A few thousand. Did you feel real good going into that, or were you still kind of like there's going to be 80 cars and it's sports spec racer and anything can happen, right?
There's always that, but we were pretty confident that year.
Yeah.
We had a great season. We really honed in pretty much our everywhere setup, but Road America the car just clicked that day, in that season at Road America. And we were, even like the night before, just hanging out, there was just something going on where it just felt really good. I felt calm. I knew the car was good. I knew it was just, be there at the end and be in the right position. And the night before, Greg Miller, who runs Spec Racers also, we were sitting there hanging out, talking the night before the race, and he looked at me, he goes, well, how are you going to do tomorrow? And I looked at him square in the eye, and I go, I'm going to win the race. And I had some seriousness to it because I had the confidence. I didn't, I wasn't necessarily trying to predict the future or anything, but that's just, I went into it knowing I had a good car and that if things worked out and I didn't get mixed up in something bad or taken out by anybody or anything like that, because Road America were so tight all the time.
Sure.
But I just kind of felt like I had the car to beat, to be honest.
So had you won a championship in any of the other stuff that you had done before that?
I'd won like the regional championship way back in the day, in '97. So I mean, and then other than that, really the go-kart championship,
Right.
but
no national championships.
No national championships and no Pro Series championships, anything like that. I did finish the Pro Series in third in 2000.
Right.
And then I won one race at Vegas that year. So I had a taste, and things were supposed to go bigger for me. And then, the Trans Am thing all derailed. So that was, it's a story I've actually been telling Morgan Burkhardt lately, because I feel like he's got an opportunity to do things that I feel like I maybe should have been able to do back when I was his age. And I'm trying to pass things along to give him as much help as I can, because I think he's a great kid.
Yeah. So I've known his family for 2 decades, 3 decades, maybe now, almost 3 decades. And, I've been following him and, talking with the family and all that kind of stuff. And it's been interesting to listen to the old shoes of Spec Racer Ford who've gotten a chance to get to know him, and without really me prompting much, the stuff that I'm hearing people say, I know he's a good kid and all of that, but the way he drives on the racetrack, it seems like he is well beyond his age in the way he handles himself on the racetrack.
I mean, if you would have asked me a few years ago if I'd ever tell a 17-year-old kid that, hey, I want to work with you, I'd probably laugh at you.
Yeah.
But he does not act or drive like he's 17.
No.
He's got a really good head on his shoulders, on top of being a really fast driver.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Yeah. Do you wish we're going to go a lot of places now, because you set me up for a couple things. Do you wish that you had the sim race stuff that we have today back when you're a little bit younger than me, but not by much, back when we were starting out? Because I feel like, if kids who do sim racing take it just a little seriously, it's such a great head start. It doesn't give you everything you need, but it's just a great head start.
I think, so I don't know. I'm a little torn on it. I don't do a ton of it now. I play around with PlayStation stuff. I did iRacing 10 years ago for a little bit. And it's not because I don't want to. It's just a time thing for me mostly. But I think that if I had the ability to sim race the way that sim racing is now, absolutely. I think it would be extremely beneficial. I would probably be on it. I'd probably be getting yelled at, and I'd probably be failing college, because that's all I'd want to do. Yeah. But I definitely think it gives you a heads up or head start on any track you go to, and other than the actual, unless you can afford the whole rig.
Sure.
The only thing you can't get is the feel of the elevation, maybe something like that, or the actual G-forces of everything. But beyond that, you can really set up yourself for success going into a weekend. And I think that would definitely be something that would have benefited me back then. Probably should do it now just because of the same benefit, but just don't.
Yeah, I held off for a long time because my best friend was huge into it, and he kept on saying, you got to do this. And I'm like, if I do this, I'm going to get divorced. I'm going to get hooked.
Right.
And I've got a kid who I need to spend time with, and I want to spend time with. It's not like I didn't want to. Yeah. But I mean, but I just knew I would enjoy it and spend too much time doing it. And until Alex was in 15, 16, I'm like, okay, now I can do it without worrying about being divorced.
I know totally what you mean, because I've got an 8 and an 11-year-old.
Yeah. So
kind of at that age.
Yeah, and I thought to myself when I started doing it, I'm not good at it by any stretch, because I think it's easier if you start sim racing and then go driving cars, because I'm looking for that feedback that you can't really get from it unless you have those huge rigs like we were talking about.
Right.
But I also look at it and say, even if you don't have all of that, it's just muscle memory, just like being in a race car is. The more laps you do, it does translate a little bit, and especially I think it takes the whole first session that you lose basically when you go to a track for the first time, because you're learning which way to turn.
Yeah.
You get that session back and actually get to work on more with the car, because you kind of have an idea where the braking points and where the turning points are. And I would lose a whole first race session in the past just learning that stuff. So, I find that to be a value even for us
it's
old
like
people.
A total jump start to the track, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So when you're at Road America, I don't know how long the race was back in 2020. I'm guessing probably 13 laps. Yeah, because it's a 4-mile track. It's not a short track. When you get to lap 10, does it all start going through your head? I got 3 more to go, and I'm going to take this gold medal home?
Yeah, that's pretty much the right lap. Yeah, about 3 to go. To be honest, with Road America, I've kind of changed my ways. I changed my ways there, I guess, probably in the 2017 time frame. It used to be kind of where I would bide my time and then try to just work my way up and be in a good position near the end of the race, not thinking that you needed to be up there.
Right.
The problem is there's about 10 and 12 other guys that are thinking the same thing, and you just don't want to be at the back of that group.
Right.
And so around 2017, 2018, I was like, I'm just going to try and lead. I just want to lead at Road America as much as I possibly can without racing so hard that we keep the pack 15 cars.
Right.
So I mean, I just think that was it kept me more into the top 4. And I believe that when you get set up, around lap 10, you don't have to work your way up as far, of course, if you're already up there. And there's a little bit of an establishment of order in a sense. I think when you are constantly up in the top 3-4 cars, people expect you to kind of be up there, and it makes it a little bit easier sometimes to get up there. It's funny because we were just talking about this at Road Atlanta last weekend a little bit, but just keeping the car up there in the front, not letting your guard down,
right?
I think sets you up the best way you can at Road America. But yeah, lap 10, with 3 to go, you definitely want to be in the top 3. And I know that there's a lot of talk on the broadcast and everything about wanting to be in 2nd or 3rd place. But like I said, I don't. I want to be in the lead.
Okay.
I know how to lead out of turn 14,
right,
and not get beat. I know how to get beat also out of 14. But Scott Reddick taught me so much about Road America and winning at Road America, and Brian Schofield, guys like that.
Right.
If you look back through the winners of the June sprints and the top 3s in the June sprints, and it's a lot of the same guys like Scott Reddick and Brian Schofield. And there's a reason why at a track that a lot of people think isn't the most challenging, or it's just a different kind of racetrack, especially for spec racers. But
right.
You still see the same basic group of people in the top of the big races there.
Right.
So, but yeah, leading. To me, I want to be in the lead most of the time.
Yeah. The other part about being in the top 4 or 5 in a big class like that, where you probably had, I'm going to guess you had 75 cars.
Yeah.
Right around that area.
Right.
When you get to the slower cars, when you have 75 cars, you're going to get to the slower cars at some point. And when you're in the first 3 or 4 cars, the slower cars are expecting those cars to go through. But then it's just hard for the next 5 cars to negotiate around all of those cars. It can be anyway. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think being in the lead pack is helpful when you get to that point.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of time. Well, and yeah, I keep going back to Road Atlanta because it's so fresh. But
sure,
the poor guy that was getting lapped at Road Atlanta had a train of 7 cars that were trailing him down the back straightaway, and he was trying to get out of the way. But of course, we're going to stay right behind him until the last second and use him as a draft.
Sure.
And so he started snaking, and I thought, oh, dude, don't snake.
Yeah.
But and then we just kept zinging by him down into turn 10. So I mean, and that's the thing is, you got to clear him, or else you lose the pack. And once you lose the pack, it's almost impossible to get back.
Exactly, so. Especially late in the race.
Oh yeah, it's there's been plenty of times where I thought to myself, well, it's over. I've got a third place or better, or that's the best I can do because those guys are gone.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it's people I don't think realize we were talking. Who was I talking with? I think I was talking with Denny Stripling. The draft is 2.5, 3 car lengths. You'd think it's bigger, but there's not a whole lot. Once you get to 4 or 5 car lengths, it's tough to get caught back up.
It is. Well, some of that depends on motors.
Sure.
And, they're not all the same.
Wait, but they're not all the same?
And it depends on how deep the draft is too. If it's, if everybody's kind of got a gap and there's 5 cars in a draft, it's definitely hard to catch back up. Or if there's people bump drafting ahead of you, I mean, you're going to just watch them drive away from you.
Right.
The key is, for me, and I don't know if I shouldn't give all the stuff away from Road America.
Give it away. No, it's just you and me.
Under braking, that's where you've got to close it back in.
Right.
Because the second guy in a bump draft just can't brake as late. He's got to lift earlier, as he may run over the guy in front of him.
Right.
That's one of the bump drafting and maintaining gaps and racecraft at Road America is what wins there.
Sure.
It's you got to be fast. You got to be fast. Everyone thinks it's the speed or the how deep you can go under braking. Like I said earlier, I'm not a late braker. I'm really not.
Right.
And I think most of the guys I race with probably know that. I can brake late, but I'm more worried about getting out of the corners. I late apex more than probably others do. In fact, I've been told I leave the door open too much, but sometimes people think I've got a big motor, but I think mostly it's because I'm a late apexer and I get down. Oh, I might be losing you here.
No, I think we're good.
Still got me there, Brian?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. But yeah, so but I think I get big speed down the straightaways, partly because I late apex so much at Road America and places like that.
Sure.
I mean, when your car's got basically the same everything as the guy next to you, any chance you can get more speed down the straightaway is going to benefit you.
Yeah.
And it also helps to be the pusher.
Sure.
If you can get a better run out of the corners and have more speed, you really want the faster car to be behind in a 2-car draft. Because the sooner you get to their bumper, the faster you're going to end up going down the straightaway.
Right.
It's kind of like last year at the June Sprints at Road America. My teammate Sandy Satullo and I, in qualifying, our cars were so good. It was one of those qualifyings where we just felt like it's a matter of time before we have to get a clean lap, and then we were on the radios together, and it was just we had a magic lap going, and I think it was a 2:28.5 is what I ended up with on the pole, which is over a second quicker than the record is there right now. And that was on the fresh pavement last year, so I'm expecting big speed at Road America this year.
Yeah.
I just think the track's weathered in for another season, the winter.
Sure.
And then, of course, once we get down to the fall at the runoffs, and the air is cooler and they're making more power, I think we're going to see some massive speed.
As long as there's no snow.
So. True. Yes. Yeah. We've had plenty of precipitation over the last 2 years. It wouldn't shock me.
Too funny. So you pull out of turn 14 on the final lap, heading up the hill. Tell me that story.
Yep. In 2020?
Yeah.
So it was at that point, it was just Mike Miser and Dino and me. We had kind of lost 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Not a ton, but it was enough where we could race each other only.
Right.
And so I had over-undered him to get the lead coming through Canada corner in turn 12. And I thought to myself, all right, now is the tough part because you got to hold them off coming up the front straight. How are we going to do that? Well, the only thing you can really do is not allow them a gap.
Right.
And so it was one of the slowest min speeds I've probably ever had in turn 14. And when we came out of there, Mike was so close to me, there's nothing he can do.
Right.
He can stay in the draft and he can try and pop later, but at that point, he's almost too close to get any kind of run, and he can't try and back off, of course, because there's 3rd, 4th, and 5th are now coming.
Right.
Because I've gone so slow through 14. And then it was more or less just don't let him get a good draft up the straightaway. And I had gotten a nice little punch out of 14 anyway. And the car felt good up the hill, and there was enough there that he couldn't get a run at the stripe. If the stripe was the end of the pit lane, it might have been a different story, but Road America, it's not. So
yeah, you used that hill to your advantage.
That was awesome. It was wild.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So let's go to Indy. That was as a kid growing up in the Midwest, before even like the Brickyard 400, when the only thing that happened at Indy was the Indy 500 in the month of May. That was even just racing at Indy is unobtainium. You just think that's
awesome. Yeah, it was awesome.
Never going to happen. And when they announced that the runoffs were going to go to Indy, I feel like there's going to be 1,200 cars trying to get into this race.
Pretty much were, yeah.
When you pull through the tunnel at Indy, tell me how that feels.
I mean, it's just like you said. It's a childhood dream. You come through and you see the museum staring at you in the face.
Yep.
And it's like, wow, I've seen that on TV my whole childhood, and that's kind of the backdrop of every entrance to Indy. And then you see the stick, on pit lane up there in the tower, and it's so huge. It's just massive.
Yeah.
The speedway is just a monster, and it's. I've been there before, so I knew that it was kind of part of the city. But the first time I ever went to Indy, I couldn't believe it, that it was just kind of popped into the middle of a city area. Yeah. So that's just an interesting and strange phenomenon of going there anyways. But, it's that you just get this feeling of, wow, so many greats have been here and done amazing things here at this track.
And you're now on a short list of drivers who've won at Indy. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was it was awesome. It was that I knew I had a good car that week at the runoffs. I don't think I was the guy to beat. Franklin Futrell was definitely the guy to beat. He was, I think, fastest in every session. He had the pole in our class by a decent amount. But we had rain happening before the race, and it was another one of those iffy, what's it going to be, wets, dries kind of thing. I mean, we were down to the wire where the car was on jack stands with no wheels on it.
Right.
And where everybody's got their phones out. We're all looking at the sky. We don't know what to do. We're, our buddy, our friend that used to work on the team in Elite, he's living in Hawaii now. He's texting us, what he thinks the weather's going to do. And he was watching, actually, he was key in our decision to go full dry setup before the race, because he was watching the broadcast and said, all the sweepers are out on the track right now. They're sweeping the water down off the surface.
Right.
And it doesn't look like rain for another hour. Go dry. And so we made the last decision to go full dry. Didn't soften the car. Didn't do anything like that. And honestly, that's what really won us the race. We had full dry setup, and I don't think a lot of other people did.
I was gonna say, how many people in the top 10 do you think went full dry?
Maybe two others.
Okay.
I think John Black was one of them. He drove up from, I think, 11th to finish second.
Okay.
And then I think even my teammate, I think he might have softened his car a little bit, Sandy Stullo. He finished third in the race, but he might have been the only other one that was really dry as far as the setup went. And
yeah,
I can't remember if he softened it at all or not, but
sure.
He was probably the closest one there.
Yeah.
So. But I know Franklin he went to a partial softer setup, and I could see his car wagging out there, and I just knew it was kind of a matter of time,
right,
for me to get around him.
Right.
But yeah, it was one of those races where it's like, yeah, of course I had to work hard, but I had the car under me where I didn't have to overdrive it.
Right.
I knew what it was capable of, and it didn't have to put it into strange positions. The only time I think in that race that I had an iffy moment was on the restart when I overshot turn one just a hair, and I was a little worried about John for a minute, but then I just kind of put my head down and hit the marks, and the car was just super. I mean, it was amazing.
Right.
My crew chief Ryan Hamitman has done just wonders with the setup on his cars, and it's matching up with me really well the way he does.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about Road Atlanta here this past weekend for a few minutes, but let me thank some people first. Ray Esports is the official esports league of Inside the SCCA, and we want to thank Ray for hopping on board and being part of our little team here as well. If you do iRacing and you aren't hanging out with Ray Esports either on the Tuesday night leagues or the weekend leagues, it's a blast. And the cool part about Ray Esports is it's mostly SCCA folks. So we kind of treat it like it's a real race, and we don't run people over because we can, and we won't spend any money doing it. And that's why I like doing stuff with the Ray Esports folks. And even though I'm slow, they still let me go play, and they don't give me too much of a hard time about it. Also, RaceKeeper is the official in-car camera of Inside the SCCA. I had RaceKeeper in the little Honda Fit at the Solo Nationals last year, and so there is video evidence of how slow I was there also, but that was not RaceKeeper's fault. That was mine, but a great little tool there. You get to put overlays in and your logo and all that kind of cool stuff, so check those folks out. All the information for both Ray Esports and RaceKeeper are in the show notes, so give them a call, hit them up on the online, all good stuff. So, all right, now that that's done, let's talk for a second, or maybe a few more of the seconds, about VIR or about Road Atlanta this weekend. Let's say it was messy. Messy conditions-wise on Saturday, and you might say, okay, that's why the track action was messy, because it was a little funky-dunky on Saturday with the changing track. Started out wet, dried out, that kind of thing. Sunday, though, could not have had better weather. It was a little windy, but other than that, it was about as perfect as you're ever going to get at Road Atlanta.
For sure.
We called all the races, and I would have to go back and look. I think there may have been one race in 16 that didn't have a full course caution. I think it was a production race. If I remember correctly, don't quote me. Once you do 16 races in a weekend, you kind of lose track of which one is which. But
oh yeah, I'm sure you do.
But the vast majority of the races had at least one full course caution, and several of them had 2 or 3. So I just have a hard time trying to put that all together, because there's been such a big effort for the last 3 or 4 years with the green to checker and driver advocates and all this kind of stuff. And I see people. It's the kids who have no. Well, it's not just the kids. I'm seeing veterans make stupid mistakes, do stupid things too.
Oh yeah.
What do you think's going on?
The kids put us in those positions.
Oh, do they? Okay. All right. No, but seriously though, what do you think's going on at Super Tours? Is it just Super Tours?
Well, I think we have a slight respect problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I used to think that a lot of these issues weren't happening up front, and it was the mid pack that was the bigger problem. A lot of people that didn't know each other, that kind of stuff. But Greg Miller was very quick to point out the other day on the phone to me that a lot of things have been happening at the front of the pack lately.
Right.
And it's hard for me to honestly put a finger on it, and at least from where I'm at in Spec Racer, people, and I hate to go back to the younger people,
right?
But there is less lifting to save both of you,
right?
I think the younger you are, and that's been the goal of Spec Racer, going with a SADEV transmission now, and the goal has been to reduce, to lower the age of a Spec Racer driver. For longevity in the class,
sure,
and just the trend of racing in itself. And then you've got guys like me and Denny and Russ Turner and Schofield and even like Franklin and people like that, where we've been around long enough. But then you get Morgan Burkhardt and Grant Vogel's pretty young, and some other, like my teammate Jace Petty, who's I think 15,
yep,
and he's knocking on the door. And they I don't know that they've hit anything very hard in their careers.
I know.
In fact, I think Morgan just told me that when he hit the wall with Clay the other day, that was one of the first times he's ever done that.
Yeah. And he was
gutted,
so I think
there's some of that. I think you can look at the SMX race and say, oh, well, there's money on the table, and that is a big part of it.
Sure.
And I don't, as much as I can understand and think it's really cool that there's money on the table, it's amateur racing still. I don't know if there should be, but that's a whole nother story. So, and it changes the way people race.
Sure.
When there's money.
Sure.
But as a whole, tracks are also less willing to do hot toes, which has kind of changed, I guess, how we used to do hot toes all the time,
right?
Or at least they would leave a car in a somewhat safe spot more often,
right?
And I think liability has changed that, and they're not willing to do it as much anymore. Road America is one of the few tracks. Road America, not Road Atlanta, is one of the few tracks that still does hot toes,
right?
Although there's sometimes I think they shouldn't.
There were some hot toes last year at the June sprints where I was like, are they really doing that?
There was a couple of them at the sprints last year where I thought, why did they make us go through that?
Yeah.
And I shouldn't say they make us, but if you lift in a spec racer, you're done.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes that gets the better of us, even though we're, it's obviously if somebody hits a truck, it's probably over.
Right.
But, there's got to be some judgment there. I think if the cars are off the track and they can get to it without putting trucks or something on the racetrack, I think that's worth a shot at a place like Road America.
Yeah.
But we're seeing less and less of that, and I'm assuming it's due to liabilities.
It is. And I think we do them out here at Buttonwillow, but we're not a corporate owned track, and that's a lot of what we're going to these days. I do think, and I've been a part of seeing how the Flagtronics can work with other series, and I don't know where SCCA is going to take Flagtronics or how quickly they're going to get to implementing all of its features, but I know that there's a lot of tracks that when you can use their code 35, that they're willing to put trucks out on the track faster, and it turns the caution from 4 laps or 5 laps to 3 laps, 2 laps, and that's a big benefit if the club decides to use it in that fashion at some point in time.
I hope they do.
I do too. I'm a big proponent of the system because I've seen it work really well.
Right.
And the hard part right now is that
I have it in my car, and I got passed by Denny actually because my Flagtronics turned yellow under the bridge, and it wasn't actually yellow yet. So
I do think
it's got to be all or nothing almost.
Yes.
But
this partial implementation I don't think is doing it any favors as far as getting acceptance, because it's if everyone doesn't have it, exactly that thing can happen, which you said, and that's frustrated for you.
I'll probably put tape over it until it's required.
Exactly. And that's sad because I think that people should have the opportunity to learn how to use it before you're at the runoffs, and now everybody's got it. My opinion is that's not the place to be learning how to use a system when you're trying to race for a national championship.
Going on at the runoffs, that shouldn't be one of them.
Right, but I think at some point we're going to get to the point where it's fully implemented across at least the Super Tour and the runoffs, and I think that will be a help to this. The other thing I find it's been interesting is I've seen a lot of, we kind of always say, okay, on the last lap you send it. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the first 4 or 5 laps of these races. You got to get to the finish line to win, or even to score well.
I agree. I know, and I think that's where experience comes in.
Yeah.
For me, for sure. And that's really what won me the race this past weekend on Sunday.
Right.
It's the experience of understanding what the car can and can't do, and not sending it off the track.
Right.
That's how you win races.
Right.
But at the same time, I think that there's a lot of really great race car drivers, especially in Spec Racer, but in a lot of the classes. And it is hard to win a Super Tour race. And people, they're taking maybe more chances than they should. They're not giving as much room on exits as they could. And people touch, and if you're already at the limit, it's going to put someone in a gravel trap or something like that, and then of course that's it. You're going full course yellow.
I also feel like that the way the classes are now, if you look at our classes top to bottom, and if you take out the production classes and you take out the open wheel classes, Super Touring, Touring, Spec Racers, Spec Miatas, it's not hard anymore to build a really, really good race car. So top to bottom in these races, you've got 30 cars, and if the driver is up to it, could probably run in the lead pack in these races. Whereas before, back in the day, a third of their class knows they're not going to run up front. The middle third of the class is like pretty sure they're not going to run up front. And you've got your top third who is probably good. So there's a different mindset. If you know you're not going to be up front, you race a little bit different. You want to get your laps in, you want to learn.
Sure.
But now everybody, top to bottom in these classes, for the most part,
the equipment's reliable, the equipment's fast.
So
the limitation is you don't have any excuses either, right?
Right, exactly.
And maybe it does give people that that thought that they need to push that little bit extra harder, and not everybody can handle that extra.
Right.
And that's I say this to some younger guys all the time, but self-preservation, that's a word that comes up all the time when I'm hanging out with like Russ Turner, Denny Stripling, my buddy like Greg Miller at the track. We're all, there's so much self-preservation in a race that it almost gets old, but you just have to be there. And I think that's why you see like in, Spec Miata or STL, Danny Stein, he keeps winning races. I mean, he's really good and he's really smart. And he's got all sorts of experience, and there's lots of people like that have been doing this fast for a long time.
Right.
And it is, that's what Ben Jacobs was telling me over the weekend. He's like, it is really hard to come into a class where there's guys that have been doing this for 30 years and doing it well.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm somewhere in the mix of that. I started these way back, but I had a big gap. But
right.
I mean, I know this car extremely well. I feel like I can put it in a lot of different places where lots of people can't.
Right.
And recover and not lose as much as maybe others would. So,
you said something.
But at the same time, I've been known to take, I've been the reason for yellows before too. So
sure.
It can happen to all of us.
You said something right off the top of the show when you were talking about your early days and when you decided to go wheel to wheel from karts. And your dad had a lot of background in the club at that point in time. And he put you in a car, or I'm guessing Dad was flipping the bill at that point in time, that was at the appropriate level of machinery for someone getting started.
That was the key to it.
So, and I've held that in my brain until now because you this is where I want to go. I feel like also today that, and it's not just young kids. We've got older guys who have achieved life and now have a big checkbook, and they're not picking cars like Spec Racer Fords, Spec Miatas, Touring 4, B-Spec to go out and do their first year or two of racing in to learn racecraft and carcraft. A lot of people are jumping into cars that are way beyond their skill level, and we let that happen. Right. And there's nobody giving them advice not to do that, or not many people are, unless they listen to this show, because I'm constantly preaching starting out in a low horsepower, high momentum needed class to learn how to do this. And for a lot of different reasons, some kids got parents with money and or older people who now made their million and they're ready to go racing. They're jumping into cars that, in my opinion, they shouldn't be starting in, which means they never really learn.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, they never learn how to do it the right way, and where there's less risk to the reward. And that wasn't the case 20 years ago. As much.
I mean, I think you're 100% right. It's as far as like the parents putting some kids into fast cars too soon. I think that there's some kind of an urge that if they don't do this by the time they're 20 years old, they're never going to make it into F1, or they're never going to get into IndyCar.
Hey, folks,
I felt a little bit of that back when I was at.
Let me share something with you, folks. If you're not racing in Europe by the time you're 20, you're not going to F1. So let's get that out of your head.
I agree.
Anyway,
I have had to pop a few parents' bubbles over the last eight
right.
or so years too. There's and it's not just to get to F1, but even
right.
to become just a paid driver at all.
Yeah.
It's a very, very small amount of people that get to do that.
Right.
I think of the guys like Mike Skeen, that run basically whatever they can, and he's really good.
Yes, he is.
Whatever they can get into to get paid to drive, and kudos to him for being able to do it, to make a living, and a good living. It's something that I would have loved to do with my life as far as a living goes, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't get there, and whether it was not having the right marketing background or just the right breaks that went my way,
right.
Those at that point, that can be the difference between being doing it for a living or not. But there is a pressure, I feel, for the kids from the parents to do that quickly,
right.
And I don't think that's a good thing. I think that, and I say that, but you don't also want to stay in something like a spec racer for too long if you do have aspirations.
Sure.
I think you can get kind of stuck into it, and you still need to evolve and grow.
Right.
I think driving all sorts of different cars for young people is the way to go. But yeah, definitely learning in something slower. And I don't know if spec racers anymore are the best thing to learn in, as far as they're not slow like they used to be.
Right.
And they're not cheap like they used to be.
Right.
They're not, F3 car expensive or anything like that. But we're in the same ballpark as FE2 and some of the faster formula cars nowadays, and they're more real race cars than they've ever been, which is also the attraction for kids to come and start in.
Right. But it's certainly better to start there.
Yeah, my dad's kind of the epitome of. What's that?
I said, still better to start there than to start in a P1 car or,
Yeah. And that's what I was just going to say. Like, my dad is kind of the epitome of that idea, because when he started racing, he did it in a GT1 type Corvette.
Right.
And he felt he never learned the momentum side of things, and that's exactly why he put me in the spec racer to begin with, or the Briggs and Stratton instead of the two-stroke go-karts back then.
Yep.
I didn't know I'd fall in love with the spec racer so much that I'd want to do it basically until I can't race anymore once I got older. But it is a fantastic car, and it's an awesome car to drive.
Yeah. So. I always tell parents in another way is, if you go with something expensive, you're going to run out of money faster, where you get a longer burn. If you go into a Spec Racer Ford or a Formula V or a Formula F or a Spec Miata, your money's not going to run out so fast, because the anybody new has to learn. I hate to always say the kid. If you're 40 and you're just getting started, you got to learn. And
Absolutely.
And if you spend all your money on 7 rental rides in something really expensive, when you could have done 4 seasons or 3 seasons in something less expensive, then you've got your learning done. Now you can actually take advantage of that learning and spend your money on an expensive car and really find out what you got in you.
And, and I agree with you, but in all honesty, I think nowadays there's kids that are pegged from 10, 12 years old. These are the next ones. And they're watched their entire go-kart career, and they're already heading towards the top rides. And so parents that think their kid is going to become the next thing when they're 22 years old in the SCCA, I don't know. There may be a better focus than that.
Right. Well, and I hate to say that we have to have a rule. I think we need to have more common sense, because then you've got someone like a Connor Zilic, who is young and is killing the world. And he deserves, he's kind of earned the right to get up to a faster formula fast, because he's proven that he can do it. So as soon as you make a rule, you cut off someone like a Connor Zilic from being part of our club, and you don't want to do that either. But sometimes sometimes common sense doesn't always win out.
I would say rarely in the racetrack.
Yeah.
But you're right. You don't want to cut that off.
Yeah.
And like the Morgan Burkhardts, those kinds of
Right.
kids. And that's, I think, where the policing comes in somewhat, whether it's from stewards or the other drivers. And I would say that up until the last year or two, maybe it is part of the Green to Checker initiative, though, there was not a lot of penalties initiated by stewards.
Right.
And I think that the way that the world has gone and all the sports we watch and things like that, there's so much officiating going on to the game or to the sport, that I don't know if people think that they need to do it themselves as much. They could expect somebody else to penalize them if they do something wrong, something like that. And I think it's actually good. I think that the point system is good. I think that corner workers obviously they always called in contact, but assigning
blame,
blame or at least having a chat at a minimum with it, and that's always kind of been a thing, but I think they're taking it more serious now. Now, that's not to say it's necessarily working, and that people are listening, but people will listen if they're taken out of a race car.
Yeah,
know that. And I'm not innocent here. I've definitely had contact.
Sure.
I think we saw some on Saturday, and I had to chat with the stewards. And so now we all have cameras, and there's everything's being watched all the time. So it should be easier, I guess, than ever to do the right thing when it comes to making sure people can't continue their ways if they're doing it. Right.
So. There's no easy solutions to this.
No, there's not.
But I fear that we're going to have situations like Atlanta, and if it happens on a regular basis, people are going to not want to come spend their money to go race with us doing that. And that's that. I'm sure I know Atlanta was frustrating for a lot of people.
I think the mixed classes doesn't help either. There's a lot of mixed classes.
Yeah, it's tough, and we've got a limited amount of track time. We can't, there's laws that tell us that we have to stop. Someone said buy more time at Road Atlanta. I don't think there was more time to buy at Road Atlanta. I think they their law allows them to do one late race a year, and that's the petite. And
I don't think they're gonna use that for us.
Right. They have a curfew for all the other races, and I believe that's 5:00, which is what we're up against this weekend. So there's not really a solution there. And then you also add in the fact that you have to take a 2-hour break on Sundays to have church hours. But
and then you black flag a few, and here you are shortening races.
Right. And you help out you extend a race early because you've got extra time in the schedule, and then it happens at race after race after race after race, and then the people at the end of the day get I hate to use the word screwed, but they kind of get screwed.
But Yeah.
So it's tough, and if anybody thinks it's easy to be a steward or a control room steward, you should come sit up in a control room, take a weekend off, take a session off, and if a driver ever came up to the control, maybe not at a super tour, but maybe at one of your regional races or your divisional races, and say, hey, can I hang up with you? Can I sit up here for a couple of hours to see what happens? You would be shocked at how hard these jobs are. It's
maybe you're onto something. Maybe we should be required to do things like that.
Yeah.
How about you have to be involved at some point in making decisions upon other classes on disciplinary action as a driver, things like that.
Go
so
sit
you
in
can actually see how that process works and don't want to be a part of it for your group.
Yeah, go sit in on a court. If you're not racing at the runoffs, go or a weekend, go sit on a court. Be volunteer just to hang out. You're going to learn so much. We used to require drivers in driver's school to go spend a session on a corner with the flaggers. That doesn't happen so much anymore. That would be another great learning experience.
It absolutely would. And you get a lot closer up to understanding what they go through on a all day basis, not just your group.
Right. And when they don't call in a pass under the yellow, you realize, oh wow, there's like 7 things they're trying to do while also watching for passes under the yellow.
Right, and now they got to push like a Flagtronics button too. So
right.
It's
right. It's a lot. It's a lot. So
it is. It is.
Bobby, thank you. This has been fun. I
had a great time, Brian. Thanks for having me.
We tried to get you on last year, and you were busy. And I said we're going to do it eventually, and I'm glad we could work it out tonight. And I don't think we solved any problems, but one of the reasons I like to keep the podcast independent from the club is so that we can have respectful and sometimes difficult conversations about things that aren't always going as well as we'd like to. So,
and the goal is to make it better, right?
Absolutely. So, all right, that is going to do it for, there's a button I'm supposed to press here. There it is. That's going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski. If you like what you heard, you should like us on the RacingWire Podcast Network and on the Racing Network on YouTube so you won't miss any episodes. It would also be great if you leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. You can follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is and leave a question. On Twitter, it's at RacingWireNet. There's a new Inside the SCCA every week. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars.
I'm Dorsey Schrader, and when I'm on my way to a race, I'll listen to the SCCA podcast, Inside the Short Bus.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the RacingWire Podcast Network and Rule 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests, and not that of the SCCA.